But it was to be freedom with conditions. Speakers had to be registered in advance, and certain subjects were off limits.
Initially, if people were curious, it's a new idea. But after 1 week, they found that the speakers were not coming up with any good ideas. It's just the same criticism of the government.
We are a democratic society. We want to see something like America, open society, accountability, transparency, isn't it? Why are you scared?
Today, Speaker's Corner is rarely used and generates little enthusiasm in the population.
A one-man crusade. A one-man show. One man fighting a regime.
Well, to me, it's very successful because very few people go there to speak.
Once I described it as a kind of uneasy dance, between the government and the people. We allow you 3 steps forward, but hey, wait a minute. If you're not behaving and you're not complying, we pull you back 2 steps. I suppose incrementally there will be an increase in the end, but for a whole lot of Singaporeans, too slowly.
As Singapore celebrates its 40th birthday, it's facing something of a midlife crisis. For 40 years, its success depended on maintaining stability and order at all costs. Now, the country is trying to change, to loosen up. But how far and how fast can it go without destroying the very formula that brought so much success?
City-states don't survive that long. They have flashes of brilliance, 50 years, 100 years, then they go. The eternal challenge for Singapore is how do you ensure that what we've had in this 40 years is not just a brilliant flash and just goes away.
How will Singaporeans cope with the uncertainties of the future? Are they ready for the next 40 years? The landscape of Asia is changing, and Singapore is having to change with it. For 40 years, the city-state has been a manufacturing powerhouse, making the most of its efficient, obedient workforce. But with India and China emerging as great industrial powers, Singapore is looking for new ways to make a living.
The greatest danger which Singapore faces today, in my view, is that we have been so successful in the past. And the temptation is always there, that when you have a model which has given you success, you tend to believe that that model will continue forever, and you extrapolate into the future. But the point is that the world has changed.
Singapore's future is now in the hands of unlikely people, like Nixon Fong. He moved to America in the 80s and learned to become a computer animator. Now he's returned and is making Singapore's first big-budget animated movie.
If you're going to be the first one here, you're going to be a pioneer. And, I like this kind of challenges. This is a moment.
Fong is regarded by the government as a role model, an entrepreneur setting up a company in a new creative industry, a world away from the factories and assembly lines of old. But he's had great difficulty finding other Singaporeans to work with him in this open, creative way. Nearly all his animators are foreigners from elsewhere in Asia.
But I actually prefer, more detailed and specular. You got to really enjoy working with people, solving problems.
I actually think...
How is the government going to groom that?
Like 10%.
I think, I don't have the answer for that. But, I'm trying to groom people here, like that.
To create more flexible, inquiring minds, the government has targeted the education system for a complete overhaul. It wants young Singaporeans to learn how to think outside the box.
The problem with many of our young people, they are so busy about facts because our education system excels on grades. Grades are important, but they must read beyond the textbook. They must see beyond the scene in the movie.
The government is gambling on the future with high stakes. It's invested $500 million Singapore dollars creating Biopolis, an elaborate new center for biotechnology. This is just the sort of high-tech industry it wants to encourage. Again, most of the staff here are foreigners, but the idea is that the next generation of Singaporeans will become familiar with this way of working. And Singapore will be able to rely less simply on hard work and more on the ingenuity of its people.
The new economy is about ideas. It's a more treacherous field for the government to embark in because the path ahead is not as clear.
Ironically, the new future Singapore faces is not so different from the world into which it was born. In the 19th century, it was a small island on the trade route between India and China, having to survive on its wits. In the 21st century, it faces exactly the same challenge again.
We had a period when the big countries withdrew into themselves, and now a reopening up and a re-efflorescence. And suddenly, what we were created to do, we are now able to do again. It's almost like a return to the past.